For more on the French economy, Jacob Kirkegaard, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, joins us once again here in the studio. Good to see you, sir.
My pleasure.
France, these GDP figures, not too hot, not too cold. How do you feel?
I feel it basically means that France is on the road to a modest recovery, which is 1.2% growth for the year, which is, as you said, not too warm, not too cold, and about as good as France, in my opinion, can hope to perform without further significant economic structural reform, which this government probably will not deliver.
Well, so we have the reforms issue. We'll get to that in a moment. But you also have, other parts of Southern Europe that aren't doing quite as well. I mean, look, Greece is obviously an issue, but it's not just Greece. I mean, you have Portugal that's trying to bounce back. You have Italy that has its own issues. How much impact does that ultimately have on France? Are we making too big of a deal about those issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think Italy is actually rebounding as well. It's back to growth this year. I think it'll actually probably achieve 1% or so. So the broader regional environment is no longer a major drag on the French economy. And also included there, I don't think Greece is going to have major spillovers on the rest of the euro area, no matter what happens there.
So let's go to these reforms, these internal reforms that have been proposed. And in fact, the one that caught my eye was this Sunday work thing that they want people. Explain that to us. Why is that such a big deal?
It's essentially symbolic politics. It's essentially the French left wing, the labor unions, who view this, which is sort of ironic, given that it's labor unions, and Sunday, of course, was originally a religious holiday, but they view it as essentially part of the, if you could put it, God-given right to the French workers to take that day off. And the government has now opened up for on a limited number of Sundays, supermarkets and shops can open up to allow people to shop on their day off, which in other parts of the world is completely normal, but apparently, according to some French, is against the French way of life.
Would that make a difference in the economy?
I think very little difference from this measure in particular, but what it shows, and where it might be important, is that it shows that this is, after all, a government that isn't shying away from stepping on some of the toes of their left-wing political allies and essentially sacrificing some of the golden cows, if you like.
This other issue of tax collecting. It's always an issue. I don't care what country you're in. Tax collecting is an issue. I didn't realize it was such a big problem in France.
Well, I mean, I think as you spread out, what you want to try to do is make tax collection as smooth as possible over the year. So you don't have to have, gather a lot of liquidity at one date of the year to make your tax payments, because that's generally very inefficient. So having to spread it out as much as possible in France, I think makes a lot of sense. And it's actually, in some ways, it means that France is catching up with the system in most other advanced economies.
What else does France need to do to not just be competitive? I mean, they're already very competitive, and we're talking about, almost 1% growth, so it's somewhat respectable. But what do they have to do to stand out in the global economy?
The one thing that they have to do, which I think this government will not deliver, is a thorough labor market reform. Basically, they need to make it easier to hire and fire people. They need to make sure that these threshold effects that affect companies as they grow, meaning that when you hit 10 employees, you have to file a lot more bureaucracy. When you hit 50, it's another layer. You got to do away with this, because what it does is that it prevents growth companies from growing rapidly, and it ultimately destroys job creation. And also it means that because they know they can't really grow without having to face all these hurdles, French companies don't invest in France.
How about other countries investing in France?
I think France is a major destination for FDI. It already is, but I think it's going to be very difficult to grow that, because simply, other companies also face these very dramatic and restrictive labor market practices. It's very, very expensive to lay off workers there. Okay. Too expensive, in fact.
Final word, since I've got you here, ultimately what happens to Greece?
Oh, I think Greece, there will be a deal. The only question is whether or not it will happen before or after capital controls are imposed, which in my opinion is likely to happen if there is no deal by Sunday night.
Europe is an exciting place. Jacob Kirkegaard, good to see you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Helping us analyze